Thursday afternoon, September 17th, 2020 session of the Portland City Council. Carla, good afternoon. Please call the roll.
Good afternoon, Mayor. Hardesty?
Aye. Here.
Udaley?
Here.
Fritz?
Here.
Ryan?
Here.
Wheeler?
Here. Under Portland City Code and state law, the City Council is holding this meeting electronically. All members of the council are attending remotely by video and teleconference, and the city has made several avenues available for the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting is available to the public on the city's YouTube channel, eGovPDX, and www.portlandoregon.gov/video, and of course, Channel 30. The public can also provide written testimony to the council by emailing the council clerk at cctestimony@portlandoregon.gov. The council is taking these steps as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to limit in-person contact and promote physical distancing. The pandemic is an emergency that threatens the public health, safety, and welfare, which requires us to meet remotely by electronic communications. Thank you all for your patience, flexibility, and understanding as we manage through this difficult situation to do the city's business. Commissioner Hardesty asked for a request to make a statement at the beginning of the council meeting. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, colleagues, for giving me a moment. As you know, we have been in the midst of our latest crisis around the wildfires, and I wanted to read a letter that Chief Sarah Boone sent out this morning, and I appreciate the mayor giving me the opportunity to do that. On September 4th, 2020, Portland Fire and Rescue's emergency manager, Lieutenant Robert Root, reiterated in an email to the chief officers and fire liaison to be prepared for a historic wind event that would impact fire behavior and create conditions for rapid fire spread, threatening life and property. This critical fire weather report was forecast to be in effect from Monday, September 7th through Wednesday, September 9th. The communications and coordination between special operations and emergency operations prior to Monday set the groundwork for Portland Fire and Rescue to respond to the increased service demand. For 24 hours, and with the activation of Portland Bureau of Emergency Management net volunteers, Portland firefighters responded to over 500 calls within the city, as well as mutual aid requests to neighboring jurisdictions for emergency services. This was only the beginning as a new reality began to form that Oregon was facing the state's largest wildfire conflagration in history. The governor enacted a rarely used statewide emergency conflagration act, and Portland firefighters answered the call. Never before in the history of Portland Fire and Rescue has the department mobilized, deployed, and sent the amount of mutual aid resources under such dire circumstances to save lives and property. The coordination effort was led by EOPS Division Chief Don Kelly, who worked for 7 days straight, ensuring the city remained protected and our crews were taken care of out in the field. Later, having to evacuate his own family. By the end of the week, the number of resources and personnel deployed in response to the statewide emergency expanded to over 70 firefighters, 13 engines, 3 BC vehicles, 2 wildland trailers, 1 water tender, and 1 brush unit. In addition, all Portland Fire and Rescue members on the OSFM's incident management red, blue, and green teams were called up to duty. This extraordinary deployment of resources was only possible because employees throughout the entire organization and within every division stepped up to help. 40-hour personnel from medical services and training and prevention backfilled at the stations while others shuttled firefighters, where others shuttled firefighters to and from a base camp in Clackamas County. Other firefighters canceled vacations and volunteered for callback staffing or made themselves available for the 14-day wildland deployments after an urgent message was sent out from battalion headquarters on CrewSense. Critical support functions in Tier 1 continuity of operations were prioritized. Battalion headquarters became staffed 7 days a week to manage the volume of personnel staffing and callback assignments, while the Fire Liaison Office provided round-the-clock coverage. 24 hours a day, coordinating with the Deputy C-103 Office on resource movement into and out of the city, while also maintaining citywide coverage. The exhaustive work by the men and women at Logistics under the leadership of Deputy Chief Bill Goforth, Captain Rick Lawson, and Auto Shop Supervisor Jason Earhart enabled Portland Fire and Rescue to outfit and equip firefighters and upfit apparatus with the right tools and equipment under a quick turnaround to deploy or place reserve apparatus in service to backfill at the stations. They worked long hours, coming in early and staying late, as well as ensuring crews in the field had the logistic support throughout the duration of their deployment. Portland Fire and Rescue sent a team of backup public information officers to assist Clackamas County, who worked behind the scene to set up the Joint Information Center. Assisted with social media monitoring and content review for distribution, assisted in video production, and coordinating interagency media messaging. There are so many heroic stories to be told and incredible efforts made by people fighting to survive, and some of our employees were not immune. Over 25% of the bureaus live in areas and counties directly impacted by three of the largest fires. The behind-the-scenes effort of coworkers helping each other and their families solidifies the bonds that are built amongst companies, crews, and peers. Countless stories of firefighters opening their homes and farms to offer shelter and space for displaced employees, pets, and animals. Words alone cannot express how proud I am of the extraordinary efforts of the men and women who make up the Portland Fire and Rescue Department. And signed Fire Chief Sarah Boone. Mayor, thank you for allowing me to read that into the record. And I am humbled to be the commissioner in charge of Portland Fire and Rescue at this time. And I will say that they honor us well with the work that they have done to protect life and property all over the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. That's a great way to start our meeting. Dan Ryan is clapping. I will clap too. I'm really proud of the way the city of Portland and our employees have stepped up to provide mutual aid to other communities around the state that are really, really suffering under this latest disaster to hit the state of Oregon. And the firefighters have been fantastic. The police have stood by to be supportive to Clackamas County. We've had our transportation folks working to make sure that there are safe places for people who are evacuating. We made sure that we had adequate alternative shelter place and rest areas for people who might want to come to Portland, because believe it or not, despite the air quality, which is terrible, it was still better than the Central Cascades. This is truly an example, Commissioner, of the importance of mutual aid. When other communities are in need, the city of Portland steps up, as you just illustrated through the chief's letter. There will be times when we will need mutual aid, and then we will have to in turn rely on other partners throughout the region to support us in our time of need. And it not only makes a lot of good sense from a government perspective, it's just the right thing to do as humans to support and uplift our neighbors. So thank you, Commissioner Hardesty, for reading that. And Chief Boone, if you're listening, thank you for taking the time to draft that. It's a great, positive, uplifting statement, and it's what we all need to hear right now. Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you.
Carla, could you please read our, oh wait, I forgot something. I forgot our legal notification. How could we forget that? We will now hear from legal counsel on the rules of order and decorum.
Good afternoon. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinances. The published council agenda at portlandoregon.gov/auditor contains information about how and when you may sign up for testimony while the city council is holding electronic meetings. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is unnecessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When your time is up, the presiding officer will ask you to conclude. Disruptive conduct such as shouting, refusing to conclude your testimony when your time is up, or interrupting others' testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruptions may result in the person being placed on hold or ejected from the remainder of the electronic meeting. Please be aware that all council meetings are recorded. Thank you.
All right. Hey, thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. Carla, first up, we're going to read two items together. Items 743 and 744. And if you're here for 745, that's not going to happen today, just in case anybody's on the line. Carla, could you read 743 and 744 together, please?
Accept report dark skies, strategies for reducing light pollution in Portland. And 744, proclaim September 19, 2020 to be Lights Out Portland Night in Portland.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. I am giddy as the new commissioner in charge of the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability to present this present these issues today. Mayor, I'm not going to take a lot of time with an introduction, but I would be happy to bring up the Bureau Project Manager, or is that something that you would like to do?
I want to just make a brief statement if I could before we do that, and then I'll turn it back.
I'm happy to let you do that, Mayor, and I will keep my statements until the end, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's great. And Commissioner Hardesty, I appreciate your willingness to step up as the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability's commissioner in charge. I know that you're deeply committed to the agenda of the Bureau. Your strong support of both the residential infill program as well as your unique connection to the Portland Clean Energy Fund, which are going to be two important areas for that Bureau going forward. It's critically important. So your willingness to step forward at this time is greatly appreciated. So colleagues, I am pleased to present with Commissioner Hardesty these two items together. The Dark Skies project was very important to our late friend and colleague, Commissioner Nick Fish and his team. And it's also work that I've strongly supported as the prior commissioner in charge of the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. The strategies that are outlined in the Dark Skies report support our citywide goals to create a healthy, equitable, and resilient city. Light pollution, we know factually, is bad for humans, it's bad for animals, and it's even bad for plants. It gets in the way of activities that bring us joy, like stargazing or bird watching, even though we can't really do much of either of those this week. Improperly shielded light also contributes to glare that makes it dangerous on occasion to drive, to bike, or to walk at night. Science tells us that it's also bad for our mental health, and it's disruptive to the animals who call Portland home. They too have cycles. And the pandemic is underscoring how biodiversity, the health of the environment, and human health are inextricably linked. and the need for us to pay attention to those connections is paramount. The good news is that there are clear solutions with multiple benefits. I want to thank the many staff and community members who've pushed this work forward over the past few years. I look forward to hearing the report, the recommendations, and the community feedback this afternoon. So with that, I'll turn it back to the commissioner in charge, Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. And colleagues, today we'll be voting to accept the Dark Skies report. The report provides us a set of strategies and actions to reduce light pollution in Portland. In addition, I will be reading a proclamation to declare this Saturday, September 19th, 2020, as Lights Out Portland Night. Outdoor lights help make our streets and neighborhoods safer, welcoming, and easier to navigate. But outdoor lighting that is poorly designed or poorly shielded produces light pollution that negatively affects humans and wildlife and safety. Portland is fortunate to only have moderate levels of light pollution compared to many large American cities, but existing outdoor light at night has negative impacts on the people and the environment. As part of the 2019-2020 city budget, City Council directed the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability to explore actions to reduce light pollution in Portland. And as the mayor said, this was very near and dear to our former colleague, Commissioner Fish, and his staff. Before voting to accept the report, we will hear a brief presentation from BPS staff on the report's findings and recommendations. And I'm proud to turn this over now to BPS staff Shannon Bruno to walk us through the report. Hi, Shannon.
Hi, thank you very much. Colleen, if you could start the presentation, that would be great.
Are you ready to go, Shannon?
I am ready to go. I was going to wait for the presentation to start. Are you all seeing the presentation?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
Maybe a caller could give us up. There we go.
There it goes.
There it is.
Okay. Let me get my notes back. All right. Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty and Mayor Wheeler and members of the City Council. My name is Shannon Bruno, and I am a city planner with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I'm here today to present the Dark Skies report. With me are my colleagues Sally Edmonds, Daniel Sobing, and Nicoya Phillips with BPS, and Lisa Elbert with PBOT. All four of them worked with me to produce this report and are here to help answer any questions you may have. After my presentation, we have invited guest, Mary Coolidge with Portland Audubon. Mary is the Bird Safe campaign coordinator and is an expert on the issue of light pollution and its effects on humans and wildlife. Both she and Roberta Jortner provided invaluable feedback during this process. I also want to acknowledge my BPS colleagues, Danny Grady and Sean Wood. They're not here today, but they've been part of the team throughout the process. Next slide. My presentation this afternoon will walk us through the project background, the definition of light pollution, what it is and isn't, the negative impacts caused by light pollution and best practices for reducing light pollution, and a brief description of the recommended actions the report calls for. After I'm finished, Nicoya will talk about the equity focus group meeting that she helped facilitate. And after Nicoya, Mary will provide remarks on behalf of Portland Audubon. Next slide. Outdoor lighting is a very important element of our urban areas at night. Outdoor lighting allows for safety and circulation, allows for extended activity beyond daylight hours, and helps create a sense of place. Next slide. While good intentional lighting is an essential element of our city, outdoor lighting that is poorly designed or poorly shielded produces light pollution, which is the inappropriate or excessive use of artificial light. In 2016, scientists estimated that 99% of the population of the continental United States experiences some amount of light pollution. Next slide. Light pollution negatively affects human and wildlife health and safety, and it impairs our ability to see the night sky. But the good news is, with advances in LED lighting technology and improvements in lighting design, it is possible to reduce energy consumption and have a vibrant, safe, and pleasant city at night while keeping light on the ground and where it is needed. And that is what we have been exploring with this project. Next slide. Portland is fortunate to have only moderate levels of light pollution compared to many larger American cities. But without intentional action, light pollution will continue to proliferate. Current projections are that the city's population will increase by 260,000 people by the year 2035. And the city will continue to grow to accommodate our population by building new homes, roads, and businesses. Smart city policies and construction rules and regulations can help prevent new and existing development from contributing to light pollution. Next slide. This is not the first time that the issue of light pollution has been recognized by the City of Portland. Light pollution was first recognized by the city in 2003 when developing the Bird Agenda, which was part of the city's responsibility as a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service urban bird treaty city. Many city policies related to bird-friendly building design and reducing light pollution have been adopted since then, including those listed here. While Portland has adopted some policies related to reducing light pollution, we lack a comprehensive strategy for regulating outdoor lighting. Next slide. Light pollution comes from exterior lighting on our homes and on commercial and industrial buildings, from bright lights in parking lots, lights on outdoor signs, and from streetlights. Not all outdoor lighting causes light pollution. Light pollution comes from outdoor lighting that is unshielded, overly bright, or poorly directed. It is also caused by indoor lighting that spills out of buildings, especially from tall buildings. Light pollution is not the only issue we face related to outdoor lighting. There are areas in Portland that are light deficient in terms of well-designed and adequate street lighting. The Bureau of Transportation has plans, including the recently adopted pedestrian plan, to address these areas. The Dark Skies Project is particularly focused on ensuring that outdoor lighting is directed where it needs to be and not where it doesn't need to be. For example, into the sky or into the yards and windows of neighboring properties. Next slide. There are documented negative impacts from light pollution. Next slide. There is growing evidence that artificial light at night has unintended health and safety consequences. For example, recent studies indicate that outdoor light at night can reduce the amount and quality of sleep that people get, and the findings show a disproportionate effect on people living in neighborhoods with higher poverty levels. Many studies have linked artificial light at night with suppressed melatonin, which is a key hormone in the regulation of our internal clocks. And the studies show that shorter wavelength, blue-rich white light is most effective at melatonin suppression. A study in Spain has found an association between exposure to outdoor light at night and breast and prostate cancer. And from a safety perspective, we know that well-designed outdoor lighting is critical to community safety and security, and that poorly lit areas experience more car accidents and pedestrian deaths. However, light pollution, especially glare, also poses safety and security risks, particularly for pedestrians and driver safety. And a recent study finds that sites with overly bright light levels and color temperatures in the blue light range and above are more likely to be perceived as unsafe. Next slide. Light pollution also negatively affects wildlife and ecosystems. Many species of birds migrate at night, and artificial light at night has altered the nighttime sky through which they fly. The light attracts and disorients them, and they fly into windows. The estimates of the number of birds dying from window collisions across North America annually range from 98 million to close to 1 billion. Research also demonstrates harmful impacts on many other urban and non-urban species, including mammals, amphibians, bats, fish, turtles, marine species, including corals, and primates. Outdoor artificial light at night can impair wildlife habitats, can cause increased predation, and weakens the immune systems of animals. And the impacts are not limited to animals and their habitats. Light pollution also negatively affects insects, trees, and plants. Next slide. Over-illumination, which is lighting well beyond what is required for a specific activity or time of day, wastes money. The International Dark Sky Association estimates that 30% of all outdoor lighting in the United States alone is wasted. That adds up to a cost of $1.4 to $3.5 billion and the release of between 6 and 17 million tons of carbon dioxide per year. Next slide. And light pollution prevents us from seeing more stars at night. Despite the fact that LED lighting has become more energy efficient over the years, Earth's artificially lit outdoor area grew by an average of 2.2% per year between 2012 and 2016, and continuously lit up areas such as cities get brighter each year as well. As a result, astronomers at observatories can see the effects of sky glow from bright cities hundreds of miles away. Sky glow from the city of Portland is clearly visible from the Goldendale Observatory in Goldendale, Washington, 117 miles to the east. Although Portland has considerable sky glow, there is still some night sky left to protect. Next slide. We can solve this problem. Experts in lighting design and engineering and night sky conservationists agree on these 5 principles for reducing light pollution. All light should have a clear purpose. Light should be directed where needed. Light should be no brighter than necessary. Light should be used only when it is useful, and we should be using warmer color lights, meaning less blue-rich white light where possible. Many cities and counties across Oregon and North America have implemented these principles through comprehensive lighting ordinances that include clear codes, regulations, and public outreach efforts to reduce light pollution in their communities. The recommendations contained in this report lay a foundation for how Portland can take similar steps toward reducing light pollution. Next slide. There are 21 recommended actions in total, and they are organized into strategies that center on establishing a comprehensive set of regulations for outdoor lighting, including on all homes, buildings, and signs. Many jurisdictions across the country and in Canada have established dark sky ordinances, including Multnomah County, Wilsonville, Tucson, Arizona, Boulder, Colorado, and Toronto, Canada, addressing the color temperature and shielding of streetlights, and promoting and incentivizing property owners to upgrade their existing outdoor lighting to shielded lights at the right intensity, and to turn off unnecessary outdoor lighting when not in use. Participation in this type of program has been an important way that cities like Chicago and New York have reduced light pollution from tall buildings. Next slide. We released a public review draft of this report in July. By the end of the public review period, we had received over 200 comments. Almost all of the comments were supportive, and most expressed a sincere hope that the city follows through with implementation of the recommendations. In fact, establishing the regulatory program as soon as possible was the #1 comment we received. We've received a handful of additional comments over the past few days, and they are all supportive and consistent with the types of comments we received on the public review draft. Next slide. Now I'd like to turn it over to my colleague Nicoya, who can tell you about our equity focus group that we hosted in early August.
Thank you, Shannon. And good afternoon, commissioners, mayor. Thank you so much for making time for our team. Commissioner Hardesty, looking forward to working more with you. My name is Nicoya Phillips. I've been working in the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability for a little over 2 years. And my focus at that time was on community engagement and finding better ways to engage communities of color in our conversations around planning projects. And just over the last month and a half, I just transitioned to becoming the Bureau's equity manager. So I've had a really fun time working with this team. I'm putting together this equity focus group, and I just want to share a little bit of what we learned. So on August 4th, 2020, we had a Zoom focus group where we invited members of the community. In particular, we were looking for communities of color, folks that live in East Portland, so that we could talk about the preliminary findings and recommendations of this report. And we really hope to learn from folks, like I said, in particular in East Portland, how projects like this might benefit or burden them. We wanted to understand how communities of color are experiencing outdoor lighting in their communities, and also learn more about the types of light-related problems that have been described in the scientific studies that were mentioned. We also wanted to talk with community members about which was a higher priority for them in terms of the challenges that were listed in the report. So, for example, issues such as energy waste, health concerns, sleep deprivation, the environmental impacts, public safety, and the sky glow. Really wanting to learn, like, is there a single issue or a subset of issues that are really pressing or more concerning for these particular community members than others? Can we go to the next slide, please? So you're looking at a couple of quotes that came from participants in the focus group. I suffer from insomnia and I've had to put up blackout curtains to block out the light at night. I live in a townhome community that has LED lighting along sidewalks and paths. And while I appreciate having the exterior lights for safety, I feel like there's a trade-off. So those are some examples of some of the things that we heard from people in these focus groups. Multiple participants reported that them or members of their family were having issues with insomnia that were at least partly attributed to the exterior light intrusion in their homes. There was also a strong association from multiple participants that exterior lighting and safety when walking at night was a challenge and a trade-off. A lot of folks shared that the lighting in their neighborhood just wasn't adequate to meet their safety needs. None of the participants were aware that they could request streetlight shielding or that PBOT would even listen to complaints about issues that they had that were related to streetlights or outdoor light intrusion. Our participants agreed that light pollution and greenhouse gas pollution should be avoided and minimized. So there was agreement on that. And they expressed an understanding that tackling light issues in Portland neighborhoods was just simply going to involve trade-off. But folks really had a high level of value and importance on all three of the topics that we talked about in depth, which were the light intrusion, the need for more pedestrian scale lighting, and the carbon footprint of outdoor lighting. And then lastly, some participants noted that the trees did block some streetlights, but there was still strong support for trees that provided shade, absorb pollution, and that mitigate the heat island effect, particularly in East Portland. Participants thought that the trees should be trimmed and that the city could employ better planning and design to work around the trees when we're designing our lighting options. Next slide, please. So in overall, the equity group findings that are summarized in the report and that can be found in Appendix D, we pulled those out for folks that were really interested in kind of doing a little bit of a deeper dive in some of the things that we learned. But the feedback from the group really supported the recommendations that are outlined in this report. And in particular, develop and implement a comprehensive set of regulations for the outdoor lighting. So making sure that these concerns are captured when we look at design and when we think about what types of regulations to put in place for them. Folks felt strongly about funding a streetlight shield program that would proactively address the light trespass coming from streetlights to really get at that issue of insomnia and light trespass in homes. And folks also would love to see us design and fully fund a public education and outreach campaign to encourage property owners to retrofit their existing outdoor lighting. So these are some of the things that we learned from the focus group. And if there are other questions, feel free to send them to us. Thank you so much.
Those are great recommendations. Thank you. Thanks for that hard work.
Thank you, Nicoya. The next slide is just an introduction for Mary. I think the next part is for Audubon to present. And you can probably stop the presentation now.
Hello, are you passing the torch, Shannon? Okay, great. Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. My name is Mary Coolidge and I'm the Bird Safe Coordinator for Portland Audubon. Audubon would like to express strong support today for the adoption of the Dark Skies report. We've appreciated the opportunity to work with city staff on this project, and we believe that the report lays a strong foundation for implementing actionable steps that the city can take to address light pollution, to protect public health, ecological health, to address equity, and to support climate resilience. The impacts of light pollution have been documented in migrating and nesting birds, as well as in mammals, amphibians, fish, reptiles, invertebrates, and plants. And a large and growing field of research looking at ecosystem impacts from light pollution is showing that really none of it is good news. Exposure to artificial light at night also suppresses melatonin secretion in humans, as you've heard, causing sleep disruption, which has actually been flagged by the AMA as potentially linked to the development of a number of diseases, including diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and depression. The report, as you also heard, also highlights the need for more research into potentially disproportionate impacts on BIPOC, low-income, and marginalized communities, which may already be facing disproportionate health stressors, including COVID-19, and maybe living in areas with higher ambient lighting and lower tree canopy levels that would help buffer that lighting. Good lighting should really also increase safety and simultaneously reduce light pollution. It is possible to do both at the same time. Poorly designed lighting also wastes a tremendous amount of energy and results in excess carbon emissions. Addressing this issue supports the city's climate action plan and climate emergency goals at a time when we all know we are seeing consequences of climate change play out right here in the Portland metropolitan region. Finally, we often talk about access to nature being a critically important part of the urban experience, and the ability to see the night sky should be part of the essential urban nature experience. Every child, no matter where they live, should be able to look up and see the stars. We acknowledge and appreciate the unique challenges that Council is facing right now. We understand that many issues are being reprioritized in order to address the most pressing and immediate concerns facing our community. We also recommend an amendment to ensure that the city will return to this work and adopt code recommended in this report within 2 years. The truth is, this report will really only have meaning if it's moved to implementation. A 2-year timeframe would ensure that the significant amount of work that's already been done to date would not simply be lost over time. And we believe that a 2-year goal is reasonable under the current circumstances. So we would urge you to adopt both the report and an amendment. Thank you also for your support today of our Lights Out Portland launch night, which is an event that kicks off the peak of fall bird migration and asks local building owners and managers, as well as residents, to reduce their unnecessary overnight lighting in order to help ensure that birds make it safely to their destinations. Past Lights Out Portland events have had over 5,000 Portland residents and up to 31 central city buildings participating. And we really appreciate the city's support in championing this event this year. Thank you all for your time. We know that it is a tremendously valuable resource.
Thank you so much, Mary, for your testimony. I believe the mayor has an amendment he'd like to propose.
Yeah, it's related to Mary's testimony. So thank you for that. It gives me a good segue. And thank you, Commissioner Hardesty, for giving me the on-ramp here. So I'm prepared to offer a friendly amendment. I'd like to offer it up for council discussion. BPS, of course, received over 200 comments on the draft report, 99% of which were supportive of the recommended actions that we're hearing about today. My office also received numerous emails from community members asking the City Council to implement the recommended actions, in particular to adopt a citywide comprehensive outdoor lighting code within 1 year. As staff pointed out at the beginning of their presentation, reducing light pollution was a recommendation that was first put into the Portland Bird agenda that the City Council adopted all the way back in 2011. And it was also included in the 2015 Climate Action Plan, as well as, of course, the Central City 2035 Plan, which we just adopted fairly recently. Community partners have been organizing around this work for many, many years, gathering data through volunteer-driven community science and working with BPS staff in support of the Dark Skies project. The report, I believe, provides clear and well-researched strategies and a roadmap for the code work. And I'd like to see if this is something that we can move forward on a faster timeline, as was just suggested. So the questions I'll put out there with this friendly amendment: number one, what would it look like to move the code work forward within 2 years? Would doing so take resources away from other top priorities? If so, what programs or projects specifically would be impacted by that? And can the work be done with less than 1.5 to 2 FTE as recommended by the report? Currently, the recommended timeline for the code work, which is strategy number 1, action 1.1 on page 32 of the report, states that it would be done within 2 to 5 years. So I'd like to propose that we amend that recommended timeline to within 2 years. And I'd like to have that discussion about this as a potential amendment, if I can get a second.
Second.
Thanks, Commissioner Hardesty. We'll leave that open, then we'll hear from public testimony, and we'll perhaps hear from staff as well on this subject and the questions that I posed. Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. Caller, do we have public testimony signed up for these two items?
The first one is a report and the second one is a proclamation. We don't take testimony on either of those.
On either of those, that's right. Thank you for the reminder. I'm very grateful. I'm so used to you telling us what we're doing. So in that case, that means we should open this up for conversation. I would like to invite Shannon to rejoin the conversation. And Mayor, I second your amendment for the purpose of conversation. But let me say, I'm also concerned about the additional pressure that we're putting on BPS, because we continue to tell them to prioritize a whole host of things. For example, they are supposed to be prioritizing the work of the anti-displacement task force. We are also just starting to do the work around the Portland Clean Energy Fund. And let me just say, I'm 100% behind the recommendation, but I think based on where we are right now as a city and all the unknowns that we just don't know what's going to happen, I would be very concerned about adding that additional pressure to staff at BPS. So that's just my opinion, but I'd love to have other people weigh in.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. I appreciate that. Commissioner Fritz has her hand raised. Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, thank you for the presentation and for all of your important work on this. Thank you for the community engagement. Obviously, this is fulfilling a direction that Council has been given, and it's a really great report. I encourage everybody watching to read it. Regarding the motion, the Mayor was very careful to frame it in terms of evaluate what the priorities are. I realize you're just newly in charge of Planning and Sustainability, Commissioner Hardesty. I would imagine that he prepared the amendment before the transfer was made. But second of all, perhaps more importantly, the motion is to accept the report. And when we accept something, that means that we acknowledge that the report has been written rather than that we are promising to do absolutely everything in it. If we were adopting the report, that would be different. This appropriately is accepting the report because it is a framework, and obviously it can be modified based on operational needs and indeed urgent climate needs as we're all experiencing recently. So I support the amendment because I think it does call for doing things as quickly as possible, and especially because it also recognizes that there are other things, and we do ask our wonderful planning and sustainability staff to do a lot of things. But I'm astonished they could just continue to be able to do them all. So unfortunately, you're the victim of your own success in that there's more we pile on. You have to cry uncle, although I know that occasionally you do. So that's just my thoughts on that.
No, that's wise. It looks like Joe Zender is about to submit his resignation or something.
Uncle.
I'm actually shocked he didn't do it a couple of years ago.
You look very concerned, which makes me very concerned.
Oh, sorry about that, but yes.
So, Joe, did you want to weigh in on this conversation?
Well, yes, just briefly, I appreciate your all support for this important work. That's why we undertook it and squeezed it in, actually, because it was funded by City Council. So we appreciate that. But we didn't have it in our work program last year. And Shannon stepped up and out of other projects that she was working on to honcho it through. And we went to a consultant to help us do it. The next stage of this is turning it into code. And we know from experience that that's at least a year and a half. And just because of all the negotiations with the infrastructure bureaus and the other bureaus that we touch when we get into adding a code provision, and the level of public outreach that we want to do, although there's a lot of support for this. But it's similar in many ways to when we adopted the tree code as well, created the tree code. Which started off in one direction and ended up taking much more time because the controversies are embedded in the specifics of the code that's attached to this report. So there's still a lot to work out, I guess, is the point of that story. And right now we have an aggressive and important environmental planning set of projects going that I know are also priorities of City Council and priorities of Audubon. We're updating the protections for natural resources through the environmental zones, doing that citywide. We've had to break it into phases because we don't have enough money or staff to sort of do the whole city at once. We're assisting with development of a proposal for new provisions in the tree code. This is that same team, that environmental team, and that's coming to City Council shortly. We're completing the south reach of the river plan and bringing that to City Council this year. And once again, that's that same team. And we have we're in a budget note, and I believe in the bump, potentially funded to undertake the update of the FEMA floodplain regulations, which is a critical and a required step for us to do to protect flood insurance access to Portland households and businesses that need it. And that, too, is supported by the Audubon because it's a result of a lawsuit that they brought against the federal government. All that is to say that we're really know the importance of the environmental work. This Dark Skies is part of that. We also are anticipating a rough budget year in the coming year, so we don't have this funded this year. Actually, currently, all of our environmental planning program is outside funded through either an IA with the Bureau of Environmental Services or other funding that we're potentially getting for the floodplain. That goes away next year. It's not, you all know the budget situation more than I do. So we're being very conservative. We've got our eye on these really important priorities. And that's what we, as much as we know the importance of Dark Skies, we really believe that the same kind of objectives for both climate change and protection of these resources is being accomplished by our other work.
Thank you, Joe. I really appreciate you weighing in. I want to see if there are any other Commissioner Udaley or Commissioner Ryan want to weigh in on this conversation. And I think we've actually kind of focusing the conversation at the moment on the amendment that the mayor has proposed.
I don't have anything to add to that. I'll just save my remarks for closing.
Excellent. And so we've heard the mayor's amendment, and we've heard Commissioner Fritz and my position, which are at the opposite ends. I think what I can agree to is this is really important work. This is an incredible report. But let me just say that I would be very concerned with making promises that we cannot keep. We have a bureau that's already overloaded, and we'll have less resources next year. And so because of that, not because I don't think this is important, I think everything that BPS does is extremely important and extremely vital. And this is not any less vital. I think they were very realistic to say 2 to 5 years, because we don't know what we don't know as we sit here and prepare for our response as we come out of COVID. And so I think I should ask Caller to call the roll on the mayor's amendment.
So Commissioner Hardesty, let me do this, because I really just wanted to put it out there as a topic of conversation, vis-a-vis urgency. And as Commissioner Fritz pointed out, this really is the acceptance of a report. I think you've heard the concern. This is something that keeps falling through the cracks. So I'd like to see us keep the pressure on it. But it's clear the council is divided, and as the commissioner in charge, I want to really respect your leadership of the Bureau and your comments. So I will withdraw my amendment. It is a friendly amendment. And I think we should get updates from the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability on their progress on this, and keep it on the front burner and not let it slip to a secondary responsibility. But I also don't want to hamstring you as the incoming commissioner in charge, and I'm hearing what you're saying, and I want to respect that in the context of the form of government which we currently have.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. So it sounds like you have withdrawn your amendment, and that means we will be voting on voting to accept the report as presented. Caller, would you call the roll?
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaley?
Well, I'm very supportive of this and thankful for the work that went into this report and proclamation. This was an issue that I became really interested in during my first campaign, when PBOT was beginning to replace our incandescent street lamps with LED bulbs, and they were quite bright. And I'm happy to say that we have made improvements since then. And I just want to let Audubon know that the doors always open. We welcome their input. And if they feel that there are additional improvements PBOT could be making, please let us know. I grew up in rural Oregon, where there's virtually no light pollution, and there's just nothing like looking up at a dark night sky and being able to see the stars. And I would love for more Portlanders to get to experience some approximation of that. So we're well aware of all the negative impacts that human behavior has on our environment. And this is just one of many steps we need to take to mitigate that impact. I vote aye.
Fritz?
Well, I live in deep southwest Portland, so I can see the stars pretty nicely. There's hardly any streetlights. So I think that everybody should have that joy of being able to watch the Perseid meteor showers just by standing outside, etc. More seriously, thank you, Audubon, for keeping this on the front burner, Bob Salinger and your entire team. This is people may be wondering why we're spending time on this. Every aspect of the climate catastrophe is important, and light pollution and its effects on birds, its effects on various other things, and its effect on humans. I was ridiculously happy today. I could see the sun. I could see shadows in my backyard. Just for a brief moment, I can't see them anymore. But the joys of lack of pollution of any kind are something that I will definitely be mindful of for the rest of my life. And so thank you again for all of your work on this. Thank you to the Bureau of Planning. I know that your staff does a lot of things, and we ask you to do a lot of things. Of course, the council next year could consider funding additional positions if that's necessary on a one-time basis to get this job done sooner rather than later. I wouldn't want to lose the valued staff who've worked on it for so long, to make sure that they can finish up the work that they've done. With that, I'm very grateful and thankful to vote aye.
Ryan.
Yes, thank you very much for this presentation from the Bureau and with your partners at Audubon. I want to pull out a few things that I heard. I thought the dialogue that came up between the relationship between safety and light pollution was a really good one. And I think the public would want to know how they don't have to be against one another, because I heard that they actually can complement one another, but I didn't get enough information to articulate that. And I look forward to that being fleshed out even more, because I think that would be one of the obstacles that we would have to go through. Two, I think knowing what success looks like on this one is fascinating. I know you mentioned the observatory in Goldendale, and maybe in 5 years' time, that glow from Portland would go down, and just make that a transparent goal. And then I also like how grassroots this can be. I know there's a couple neighbors that I want to have dialogue with about their bright lights, and how do I do that with and still be a good neighbor? And so how can this be a feel-good, Portlander movement, if you will? And then really help those that just don't understand that that's an issue. Because I think this is one where just a lot of people have no clue. And I know for me, success would look like, I always love the meteor showers around the 10th or 11th of August. And I always feel like I have to go pretty far out of town to appreciate them. So it'd be great someday to not travel so far to bring those in. So anyway, bravo, and look forward to supporting this work as it moves along. I vote aye.
Wheeler.
Well, I'm very appreciative of this work, and I'm also appreciative of the fact that equity was put front and center. Thank you for the presentation. This is something that I really hope that we will uplift as a high-level priority in our next iteration of the Climate Action Plan, which we're working on now. I'm sure a lot of people are watching this and saying, wait a minute, you guys have a COVID crisis, an economic crisis. We have a racial justice reckoning that is underway. You can't see 10 feet outside, and you guys are talking about night skies being dark. This is critically important. And while I definitely appreciate the aesthetic aspects of this, and I love gazing at the stars as much as anybody and just wondering what lies beyond, but what's really changed my view of this in recent years is the public health consequences of this. And the reality that for those of us who are urban dwellers, which is all of us, I think here, or pretty close to it, this has real implications for our sleep patterns, for our mental stability, for our ability to avoid potential negative health consequences. And there was a really good documentary that came out maybe a year ago, and I'm quickly trying to Google it, and it had a really obvious name. I believe it was called Saving the Dark, if I remember correctly, but if somebody Googles that, you'll probably come close to it. And it was a very compelling documentary that explains in short order why this issue is important and why everybody should care about it. And so I'd encourage people to look that documentary up. It's not terribly long, but it's terribly compelling at the same time. So this is great work. I'm happy to vote aye. And just because I know legal counsel is going to make hay of this, We actually never moved or seconded the report. So Commissioner Hardesty, can I make the assumption you have moved the report, Commissioner Udaley, that you have seconded it?
Yes, you may.
Second.
Great. I vote aye. The report is accepted. Thank you all. And then the next piece of this, of course, is the proclamation.
Yes. And before I read the proclamation, I was so stressed out about following what I was supposed to be doing next. I did not give my appreciations to BPS for all the incredible work that they've done. And I really wanted to take the time to say thank you very much to Audubon for continuing to push us to do more than we think is possible. Nicoya Phillips, I wanted to really appreciate you taking a lead and making sure that we're talking to our diverse communities and spending time in East Portland, which, as you know, has a lot less trees than some other areas of the city and is more prone to light pollution, I think, than other parts of the city. I also want to appreciate the hardworking staff at BPS because these are people that don't normally say no and don't normally push back because they share our passion and our values. But I appreciate the mayor withdrawing the amendment because I think that we have to be thoughtful and still move forward as quickly as we can. But I am one of those people that just don't want to make promises I can't keep. If I make a promise, then done it. I want to make sure that I do everything I can to make it happen. And I know that is the workforce that we have in BPS. So thank you. I appreciated the conversation. And I know that Audubon will hold us accountable, as will the rest of the council. So, and in that spirit, I will now read the proclamation. And I will remind everyone that even though it is signed by the mayor, it's from each and every one of us on the Portland City Council.
Commissioner Hardesty, before you jump into that, could I add a couple of thank yous?
Absolutely.
I have to do that. There's a couple of thank yous I was remiss in also putting on the table. First of all, I want to thank our community partners. This, BPS is critically important in this from a government perspective, but really this has been driven by strong community partners and advocates. And I want to particularly acknowledge Mary Coolidge, Roberta Jortner, and Bob Salinger from the Portland Audubon for their longtime advocacy on this issue and their contributions to this specific report. I also want to thank the Rose City astronomers, the staff from the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory Energy and Environment Directorate. Can you imagine answering the phones there? And many community members who got involved with this work and shared their input with the Bureau, as well as members of the staff of my office. And of course, thank you to Shannon Buono and Sally Edwards at the Bureau, Sally Edmonds at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability for your incredible and excellent work on this project. And one sort of quick ad, I encourage everyone watching today's hearing to participate in Lights Out Portland and tell your friends, your family, your employers how they can help reduce light pollution. So thank you. And Commissioner Hardesty, with that, it's yours.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Whereas Portland is a growing city in a growing metropolitan area. And whereas with growth and development comes more outdoor lighting. And whereas with increased outdoor lighting comes increased light pollution. Whereas an excess of light pollution prevents most of Earth's population from having the opportunity to observe the stars and has caused nearly 1/3 of the world, including 80% of North America, to be unable to see the Milky Way. And whereas light pollution wastes energy, increases our carbon footprint, and has widespread bad impacts on health and safety for humans and wildlife. And whereas Portland is on the Pacific Flyway, which brings millions of birds into our airspace during migration, and light pollution represents a major threat to migratory birds, including interfering with migratory patterns and contributing to collisions, which cause up to 1 billion bird deaths every year. And whereas North America's bird population has declined 30% since the 1970s, And whereas the city of Portland has adopted policies directed at reducing light pollution in Portland, including the 2035 Comprehensive Plan, the Climate Action Plan, and the Green Building Policy. And whereas during fiscal year 2019-2020, City Council funded a Dark Skies project with the goal of developing a strategy with recommendations for carrying out these policies. And whereas the Dark Skies strategy is an essential part of creating a healthy, equitable, and resilient city, whereas the Dark Skies report was presented to City Council on September 17th, 2020, and calls for comprehensive regulatory and public outreach approaches to address light pollution from homes, buildings, commercial and industrial developments, and streetlights. And whereas Portland Audubon sponsors an annual Lights Out Portland public outreach event to call attention to the fall launch of bird migration season and engage residents and building owners and managers in action to reduce unnecessary sky glow and help to prevent birds from being attracted to urban areas. And whereas Lights Out programs are key outreach strategies identified in Dark Skies report and recommendations that other cities across North America have taken to help reduce unnecessary light pollution. Whereas the city of Portland supports Portland's Audubon's efforts related to reducing light pollution, and whereas several cities of Portland buildings and facilities are currently participating in Portland Audubon's seasonal Lights Out program, including City Hall, the Portland Building, and several Portland Parks and Recreation community centers. Now, therefore, I, Ted Wheeler, Mayor of the City of Portland, Oregon, the City of Roses, do hereby proclaim September 19th, 2020 to be Lights Out Portland Night in Portland and encourage Portlanders to turn off their interior and exterior lights from 11 p.m. until dawn and go outside to view the night sky, and further encourage Portlanders to take the pledge to extinguish unnecessary exterior lighting every night during seasonal migration. And if you don't know when that is, that's September to October and April to May. That's the proclamation. Thank you very much. That is the end of what I have, Mayor.
Excellent. All right, thank you. Dan, what we usually do once we're in chambers, we all get together and we celebrate and we have a photograph, but it's a little harder this way. Take a picture of all of you with my iPhone and we'll call it good. Well,
there are people that take pictures of these Zoom meetings and they do that, right? But we'll have to get training on that.
Absolutely.
Mayor, I'll turn the podium back over to you.
All right, good. Carla, can you read 745?
Authorize changes to established safety net program, allowing the Director of Human Resources and Bureau Directors additional authority to enter into flexible safety net temporary leave, safety net severance, and reduction of hours agreements during fiscal year 2020-21 and fiscal year 2021 to 2022.
Thanks, Carla. So colleagues, we're still working on this. It needs a few more refinements based on some feedback we've received having walked the proverbial floor. So I'm referring this back to my office. Carla, that completes our agenda for this afternoon, does it not?
That does, Mayor.
All right, everybody, thank you. Good council sessions this week. We'll see you all very soon. Thanks a lot, and we are adjourned.
Thank you. Bye, guys.